Howdy, folks. I am out here today on my mother's property here in Western Montana. It's May 29th. It's 10 a.m. The mosquitoes are getting into full swing pretty much. There's like probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 around me right now. Nothing compared to like Alaska or the South, but definitely very annoying. And it's gonna be pretty hot today. We are facing a pretty gnarly heat wave for this time of year. Out here near Ovando, it's gonna be 90 at least probably on Sunday, which has happened, I think, at least in Missoula, that's happened only 12 times since 1949. So we are actually facing nothing record-breaking, but definitely something pretty unusual out here. The water tables are kind of dropping. A lot of the snowpack is already gone, which is pretty early for this time of year. And a lot of the creeks and rivers have already hit their maximum cubic flowage, whatever. I'm not actually that much of a river guy, but I do care about water. So anyway, I'm out here today on my mother's property, and I am doing a little fuel reduction and forest habitat restoration. And particularly what I am doing is I am going after lodgepole pine saplings today. The area that I am in historically has been a larch forest. So when we think about that, we think about these massive old growth larch stands that have anywhere from 10 to 50 feet between them and the next tree. Really massive, wide, spread out areas. There's some stumps around here from that. Historically, that was probably clear cut at the turn of the 20th century. And since then, we've had some regrowth of that larch, and I'll show you, there's just a ton of larch saplings around me. There's some mature larch trees as well. But largely what's occurring is we are having some really severe lodgepole pine encroachment. Now, lodgepole pine, they're perfectly natural to a lot of the forests in this region. There's a lot of forests in this region that are also commingled. So you have like some natural yin and yang going on with the lodgepole pine, ponderosa, larch, spruce, any of those native species, the Douglas fir as well. But in these forests, which were historically dominated by larch and ponderosa pine, they are a bit more of an aggressive challenger. Lodgepole pine are what's known as they're a colonizing species. So they are going to come in pretty hard and fast, and they're going to try and take up as much room as possible. And I'll show you here in a second, but once I turn the camera around, you will see that this area is being absolutely consumed by these lodgepole pine. And if we allow this to go unimpeded, then within, maybe not next year, maybe not the year after that, but within, 20 to 40 years, this area is going to get choked out. So we really need to get in here. We need to do a bit of action. We're not clear cutting by any metric. That is not what we are doing here today. We are thinning out lodgepole pine saplings so that those larch have a bit more room to grow, and the lodgepole that there are can grow up a bit more strong and healthy, so that, it's not some ugly, diseased, fire-prone thicket. So I'm gonna get us looking at these things. I'm gonna give you some examples, and let's jump into it. Copeland Birchnell here in a forest in Western Montana. So folks, we're getting into it right here. I keep saying folks, but do what you gotta do, right? So this is an area, this is a classic example of what I'm talking about. Let's get a little closer. These are the lodgepole pine that we're looking at. Naturally, like these shorter needles, pencil forest, just straight up and down, very thick. That is how they naturally grow in. Their pine cones are serotinous, which means that they open when it's really hot out. In the lodgepole pine's number one way of colonizing an area and mass producing itself is it will grow in incredibly thick, like what we're seeing right here. We're talking 12 inches between these two trees. Not good. And what they're going to do is they're all going to grow up together, and they are going to create conditions for a really severe wildfire to hit. So there's going to be all this fuel on the ground. These things are going to burn like hell. Their bark is not fire resistant, so they burn very easily. If you see that, I mean, that's like probably a millimeter thick. And even on the older ones, like this guy right here, this bark is still barely thick at all. So they are going to create these conditions for a very high severity fire to come in, and they are going to burn. And every single lodgepole is going to burn in the process. But what they're going to do is they're going to kill off the other species as well. So right here we have a larch growing in this choking monster of a thicket, and that guy is going to get nuked when this forest goes. Here's another one right here. This guy's a little further along. Totally very beautiful tree. Let's yeah, so what's a fun fact about Western larch is the only species of conifer that loses its needle in the wintertime. So it's a very, very unique tree. That is what was really the king of this region before. And so as we get this lodgepole pine in here, what they're going to do is going to create the succession of really gnarly wildfires that, you know, have an interval of, I don't know. I was reading it in one of my wildfire science books. They're going to create an interval of like probably 100 years, or that's out of the the Montana Field Guide. And it is just going to level everything in here. And then those serotinous cones, they're going to drop, they're going to open up, and then they are going to restart that cycle. And so let's see if we can actually find one of those old pine cones around here. I'm sure they've all been eaten by the squirrels and chipmunks, but you never know. Okay, well, they're not here. So what we're doing, we're coming in, we're clearing out pretty much 90%, quite possibly more, to be quite honest, of these lodgepole pine saplings, so that these larch can have the room to grow, and so that this region isn't as threatened by an intense wildfire, because every single one of these is just another piece of kindling on that fire. None of these lodgepole pine are designed to survive a fire, really, of any size, and they are designed to intensify wildfire. So we're going to get most of them out of here. We're not going to take these old growth or not old growth, but like more mature lodgepole pine, because they're doing a good job of, you know, just filling out the forest and being lovely. There's a bunch of them right there, and if you can see, there's one of our larch right here. So we're going to protect that guy as much as we can. So that's what we're doing here today. So the tool that I am using today, you know, a lot of people are you going to use a chainsaw? Are you going to use a pair of loppers? Are you going to use a handsaw? What's going on here, Copeland? What I'm going to be using here today is actually a weed whacker. This is an FS91. It's kind of small for this job, but these lodgepole pine, they're really thin, and they do not have good, they don't have really thick growth rings, so they're pretty easy to cut through. But the head I am using instead of a weed whacker is actually going to be a, you know, what is this thing called? Well, the name got smeared off because I've been cutting with it, but it's essentially just like, it's like a table saw blade, and it's got chainsaw teeth on it, so it makes it a little more rugged. And this guy is going to spin, I think it can sustain 10,000 RPM if you want it to. I'm going to be a little lower than that because that's very fast. And we are just going to be kind of moving through, brushing this area out. So this is my tool of trade. Naturally, I'm always going to have my hearing protection on. I'm always going to have my visor down so that I'm not getting chips in my face. Chaps are optional with this kind of equipment. The blade is far enough away from you that you don't have to worry about some kind of chap strike, as long as you're being considerate of the saw. But chaps can be really nice for protecting your body from debris that's flying your way. I'm sure some, I mean, if this video is actually popular, I mean, this is probably going to get 20 views, but that's okay, because, we're doing it for the love of the game. But, if some State Department guy or, National Forest Service guy or BLM dude came in, they'd see, I'm hearing me talking about chaps, they'd be like, this idiot's totally wrong, wear some chaps with that. If that is the case, listen to that guy instead. As always, though, when you are operating a chainsaw, chaps are non-negotiable. We need to protect ourselves as much as possible in these cases. As you can see, I'm out here by myself. Help is not coming to me. I need to go to the help. And chaps are the kind of thing which protect you from egregious wounds. So that I am able to get back out and then able to, you know, do that myself. Naturally, like if you're not wearing your chaps, it's not like you're gonna cut your leg clean off, but you can do severe damage to bone, flesh. You could hit a femoral artery if you're not being careful and considerate while operating around your legs. And that's just all going to be very bad. So just don't do it. Wear your protective equipment. Make sure that you are operating these tools in a careful and considerate manner, being judicious, you know, and make sure you got that hearing protection on, because I like being able to hear, you know. That's one of my favorite things to do, quite honestly, is being able to hear. So I'm going to maintain that by using my hearing protection. There's all these goddamn mosquitoes around me, but I'm going to just throw my sling on. I got one of these on here that's, you know, that takes a lot of the weight off your arms so that you don't have to worry about it as much, about, you know, exhausting your arms out. You can just focus on, you know, just like being clean with the tool. And I'm going to be cutting these saplings down. I'm going to be trying to get them as low to the ground as possible so that I'm not creating a bunch of like punji sticks, essentially. Like that could easily go through somebody's foot, which isn't good. So I'm going to be rolling through here, and I'm going to be taking what I need to take. And I will show you guys kind of how I'm doing it. Yeah. All right, so you saw those two little time lapses. There's much, I should get that out of the sunlight, actually. You never really want to leave your chainsaws or your fuel or your, or really any mechanized equipment in the sun. Not because it's gonna like blow up or something, just because kind of helps overheat the engine. And then I think it kind of vaporizes some of the fuel in the tank, so you're losing out. So we've done some thinning in here. As you can see, there's a lot of the little stumps. I got them down mostly to about 1 to 2 inches. Preferably, I mean, you could take the roots out or something, but that's not gonna happen today. And we've left a lot of our beautiful larch. Hold on, let me get one in the sunlight. We've left a lot of our beautiful larch here. These guys are in full spring, early summer blossom, and they are just the most vibrant green. And as you can see, we've got just a ton in here. There's just a bajillion over there, and they are really competing heavily with the lodgepole pine in these areas. Now, in most, probably the vast majority of these areas, lodgepole pine would win out. That's why we're coming in naturally. But I've done a lot of clearing of these thickets, and if you look at these remaining lodgepole pine that I've kept, you will see these growths. That is a fungal growth. And so it is causing a ton of damage to the stem of this tree. As you can see, it's like created this crooked damage. And a lot of times these funguses and these disease work their way into these patches because there's not a lot of airflow in them. And so that's another thing that has to be dealt with and kept in mind, is that you're just gonna have all this chizin, you know, collecting in these thickets that has to be cleared out, that is just going to spread disease and, you know, infestation, and it's just better to get rid of it when you can. And so naturally we haven't taken all of them. I was gonna leave a couple lodgepole pine in here just so that they can, you know, do their thing and continue to grow. Every single species which is in this forest that you can see is native to here and has a right to be in this forest. But in the absence of natural fire, we really need to kind of put that lens on, and we need to think about what's too much, what's too little, what do we need to protect, what do we need to get rid of more. And we need to be considerate of the historical precedent of this area. So over here, we've got this nice ponderosa pine. We've got this Douglas fir sapling. I mean, that's more of a small tree at the now. But here we have this beautiful old larch stump. And this guy was cut well over 100 years ago. But if you look around, they're just all over the place. And there's ones that are not 10 times bigger, but a hell of a lot bigger than this one. And it gives you a look at what this area was like before we really started taking trees off of it, a lot more clear cutting it, because this area was really clear cut. Sorry, there's another, that's an ancient stump over there, but yeah, this guy is a great example. And we've got to try, you know, naturally this isn't something that occurs in our lifetimes or even the lifetimes of our children or grandchildren, but we can set these places back on route to be these beautiful old growth forests again. And one of the first steps we got to do is the fuel reduction and the thinning, so that species which we want to thrive can thrive. And so there's a lot of them right here. So naturally, when you've cut, you've got a pile as well, so that you don't have all that fuel just sitting on the ground still. So I'm sitting in front of a pile that I made right here. It is entirely lodgepole pine saplings. It's probably 6 to 8 feet across, 2 feet high. Naturally, one of the concerns when we get into piling is soil sterilization, because if it's too hot, it'll bake the soil and then it'll prevent a lot of things from growing there. I think I was reading a paper that came out of Colorado from the Forest Service, and they had these huge industrial slash piles that were like 50 feet across, and they burned them back in the 60s, and they created essentially clay bowls on the land that they were made. And to this day, like, not anything really is growing there because the soil has just been baked into a brick. And so you really got to be careful about that. Naturally, there is going to be a little soil sterilization. It's inevitable because you got heat, you got destructive heat that's occurring, but you can minimize that as much as you can. So right here, this is kind of, maybe I would make it a little taller, but I'm not going to make it any wider. I don't want to hurt any of the trees, any of the saplings that are in this area. And so you want to try and minimize that. We've got a few saplings, large saplings that are, you know, 6, 7 feet away. Those will be fine as long as we are not, you know, stoking it too much, or we're doing it on like a really windy day. Sorry, there's a gajillion mosquitoes around me. And, you know, as anyone can guess, this is just the beginning of the road. When you look out into the forest around me, I mean, you probably can't see it on the camera, but I can just see dozens of acres of lodgepole thickets that will need to be cleared eventually, and that do need to be managed so that they are not becoming just a absolute cauldron for a fire to start in that would just really just nuke this area. So you got to be really careful about that. You got to be thinking about that fungus that's spreading. You got to think about what the land looked like before and how we can start helping it to look like later. And then naturally, like, once you've done a lot of clearing, I keep saying naturally, but once you've done a lot of this clearing, you can start thinking about, like, you know, prescribed burns in the future, which is a really excited thing. We are nowhere close to that, sadly, right now. We would have to get a lot of fuel off the ground. We would have to get rid of a lot of ladder fuels. So, like, if you look at this tree right here, there's all these branches that are close to the ground. A fire could, you know, a tiny little fire, 2 feet off the ground maybe, could like creep over there, catch onto those branches, and then just torch this tree. We don't want that. Naturally, we want to try and reduce that as much as possible. I'm not an expert on prescription burns, even remotely, but I do love fuel reduction, and I love forest habitat restoration. So that's what we did today. I hope you found it informative. This is kind of applicable to, you know, that northwestern Montana, probably kind of, we're east of the divide right now, but you know, you could apply this to west of the divide. There's not as many lodgepole forests over there, but you got to think about Douglas fir, any other place. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching.